Today we embark on a journey to uncover a lost history, hidden beneath the shadows of the highest mountains and the deepest cultures of the world. Once an independent nation, a land that inspired with its pursuit of freedom and spirit, Tibet is now a region whose past has been erased under the sovereignty of China. Tibet, a region that was once free and rich in its own identity and culture, disappeared after China's invasion in the 1950s. The Tibetan people's fight for freedom inspired the world, but what happened to Tibet? Where did it go? Join me as we explore the lost history of these lands where freedom once flourished and now remains only a memory. Tibet spent much of its history as an independent region. In the 7th century BCE, under the leadership of Songtsen Gampo, Tibet became a powerful kingdom. During this period, Tibet established diplomatic ties with China and embraced Buddhism from India, quickly becoming a spiritual center. Throughout the centuries, Tibet maintained its independence, balancing relations with China and India, while preserving its unique culture and governance. The Tibetan people's desire for independence continued for centuries. Their resistance to China and their governance systems within Tibet were the foundation of their unwavering struggle for freedom. Tibet was not only geographically distinct but culturally and spiritually unique. The capital, Lhasa, was considered one of the world's spiritual centers. The Potala Palace, the residence of the Dalai Lama, became an iconic symbol of Tibet's independence. Tibet's people lived freely, upholding their religious practices and maintaining a distinct cultural identity that was admired worldwide. In the early 1950s, China launched a military invasion of Tibet. China considered Tibet a part of its territory, dismissing Tibet's claim to independence. In 1951, the Tibetan government signed the 17-point agreement with China, which acknowledged Tibet as part of China, but promised autonomy for Tibet. However, over time, China's control over Tibet strengthened, and Tibet's sovereignty began to erode. Following the invasion, China began to interfere heavily with Tibet's religious and cultural practices. Tibetan monasteries were destroyed, religious freedoms were severely restricted, and the very identity of Tibet was undermined. After the invasion, China systematically destroyed Tibet's religious structures. The monasteries, temples, and other sacred sites were demolished, and Tibet's millennia-old religious traditions were suppressed. Monks, nuns, and spiritual leaders were persecuted. Tibetans were not allowed to freely practice their religion, and the cultural heritage that had defined Tibet for centuries was at risk of disappearing. In 1959, Tibetans, unable to withstand China's increasing oppression, initiated a massive uprising against the Chinese occupation. Thousands of Tibetans flooded the streets of Lhasa, protesting against the Chinese occupation and fighting for their freedom. However, China crushed the rebellion in a bloody response, killing thousands of Tibetans and forcing the Dalai Lama to flee to India. The uprising marked the beginning of the systematic destruction of Tibet's culture, and the Dalai Lama's exile began a new phase in Tibet's struggle for freedom. After escaping to India, the Dalai Lama became the symbol of Tibet's spiritual and political resistance. From his exile, he tirelessly advocated for Tibet's independence and raised global awareness of the oppression his people faced. His calls for peace and freedom garnered worldwide respect, but China viewed him as a threat and continued to vilify him in the international arena. The Dalai Lama became the face of Tibet's struggle, inspiring millions while leading his people through the ongoing fight for their cultural identity. Today, Tibet remains under Chinese rule as the Tibet Autonomous Region. China continues to impose its hegemony over Tibet, attempting to erase its unique cultural identity and integrate Tibet into the Chinese state. The Chinese government has carried out widespread infrastructural development in Tibet, but these efforts are seen by many as attempts to dilute Tibet's culture and forcefully assimilate the Tibetan people. Tibetans in their homeland continue to face restrictions on their language, religion, and traditional practices. Despite Chinese control, the Tibetan people, both within Tibet and in exile, continue to fight for the preservation of their culture. Tibetan exiles and international advocates work tirelessly to raise awareness of Tibet's plight, often facing resistance from China, which labels such movements as separatism. In exile, the Tibetan government, led by the Dalai Lama, continues its struggle for Tibet's freedom. Tibetans who fled their homeland, particularly to India, work to maintain their cultural heritage and religious practices. Tibetan communities in exile strive to preserve their traditions and live as freely as possible while advocating for Tibet's future. The Dalai Lama, now a global icon of peace, continues to speak for Tibet and its people, ensuring that their plight is not forgotten. Our journey through Tibet's lost lands has been more than just a story of a nation's disappearance. It is the tale of a people's relentless fight for freedom and identity. Tibet may have vanished from the map, but its cultural and spiritual legacy lives on. The Tibetan people, through their spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, continue to fight for their freedom, both in Tibet and around the world. Tibet may be lost to China, but its voice for independence, peace, and cultural preservation echoes in the hearts of many across the globe. This history reminds us of the value of freedom and the importance of fighting to preserve one's identity, no matter the cost.